Thank you very much, Ruby. Secretary Buttigieg, we are so excited to have you here in southeastern Connecticut. We are so grateful to President Biden for making good on his promise to, as Ruby called it, rebuild America. This bridge is being built as a byproduct of a bipartisan achievement. We've been talking about the need to rebuild this country, to put people to work, to build up our bridges, our rail lines, our roads, our 21st century infrastructure. And finally, in 2021, we did it. Republicans and Democrats coming together to pass the biggest ever investment in American infrastructure. Today, we have with us members of the General Assembly, Republicans and Democrats, here today celebrating this achievement. There's nothing political, there's nothing partisan about making life easier for the companies and the workers and the commuters who populate this community, these neighborhoods, and ones like them all across the country. And so, Secretary Buttigieg, to President Biden, we want to thank you for making this a priority and making us a priority. As Pete will mention, this was a really competitive application. There's only a handful of bridges around the country that got this size of investment, $158 million. That's still a lot of money. That matters to the governor as he's trying to make ends meet. That allows us to complete this project a lot faster. And, well, this is a project of national importance. It really is. You've heard it. This is a bridge that brings businesses and goods from state to state. It makes the East Coast economy work. This is also a bridge of local importance. The fact that it's standing today is a story of how important this part of the world is. So the work on this superstructure began on December 4th, 1941. There was actually a crowd right around the corner who gathered to watch the first girder be lowered onto a pier here. 3 days later, America was dragged into World War II. And construction on big projects like this stopped all across the country. The priority was steel for the war effort. This project required 13,000 tons of steel. But this project restarted. This project restarted in the middle of World War II. Why? Because this corner of Connecticut was so vital to the war effort because of the products produced in southwestern Connecticut, in particular the submarines that were beginning to be built, that this project got done. And so while we celebrate the fact that this grant is going to bring a benefit to the East Coast, to the Northeast, and to the country, it also brings an enormous benefit to this corner of the state, which is still a national security and economic powerhouse. The revitalization of Groton and New London that's happening because of the national security jobs here, it's going to be buttressed by the fact that we'll get this job done quicker. It's going to lower emissions, it's going to improve the business climate, but it is also going to result in the continued growth of a really important corner of Connecticut, a really important corner of America. And so I'm so proud to celebrate this. I'm so proud that the Secretary has seen the importance of this project and has blessed us with his presence here today. And I'm really proud to be part of a delegation that helped make the bipartisan infrastructure bill possible. Joe Courtney couldn't be here because there's something going on in the House of Representatives today. He, I know, sends his best to all of his friends that are here. None of this happens without Joe Courtney, but none of this happens as well without my friend and the leader of our delegation in the Senate, Senator Dick Blumenthal.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you very much. Contrary to appearances, Chris Murphy was not here in 1941. One of our strengths as a delegation is that we work together, and Joe Courtney is in Washington trying to straighten out some things going on there. But Joe, as everybody here knows, has been a steadfast champion of this project, and we fight above our weight in Connecticut. We're a small state, but we get things done because we work together and because we know how to reach across the aisle. And this reconstruction project is very much the result of a bipartisan recognition that we need to bring American roads and bridges and rail into the 21st century. We need to bring this bridge into the 21st century. And it is not just a luxury or a convenience, it is a matter of national security. The men and women who use this bridge to go to work build submarines. The trucks that cross this bridge bring parts and components to those submarines that are absolutely necessary. It's not just the convenience of avoiding traffic jams, it is our national security that is at stake in this bridge. And let me just say, yes, this bridge was built in the shadow of World War II. It's named the Gold Star Bridge for a reason. It is, in effect, dedicated to the men and women who served and sacrificed to preserve our democracy and freedom and independence. And there'll be a lot of veterans working on this bridge. Keith Brothers said it absolutely right. Helmets to hard hats. That's what we need to do in this country. Give those veterans more opportunities. And that's a program very dear to my heart. And I'll tell you another one that is. Women Who Weld. Women Who Weld. There are going to be a lot of women working on this bridge. And they may need a lot less training than the men. But let me just end with this thought. When Secretary Buttigieg called me last week, he emphasized, in fact, how competitive the grants were. How many, I don't even know the exact number, but it was more than 100, and a very small fraction received this support. And I think it's a tribute to the men and women who work every day in southeastern Connecticut and throughout our state. We have some of the most talented, dedicated, gifted iron workers, building trades workers, Teamsters, they're the ones who drive those trucks, and others, and we have some of the best unions. And those training programs, those apprenticeship programs, are often run by those unions. I'm asked by the Pentagon, as a member of the Armed Services Committee, most commonly, when they say they are awarding another contract to a defense manufacturer in Connecticut, do you think you'll have the men and women who will have the skills to do those jobs? Will you have the trained workers? The unions are building that workforce, and thank you, Keith Brothers. Thank you to all the union leaders who are here for making it possible to defend our country and provide those workers with the skills that are needed. I want to thank Secretary Buttigieg for his leadership, not just on roads or rail, but also on airlines. As everybody here knows, he has provided the kind of strong and dedicated leadership that's necessary to hold those airlines accountable. Separate subject, but I couldn't let today pass without thanking him for his leadership on that kind of transportation as well. And finally, I just want to congratulate Governor Lamont on another term, and our legislators. Very, very proud to be there this morning when he and our state legislators were sworn in, a celebration of democracy, the peaceful transition of power. We get it right in Connecticut. We do it right, we build it right, and we're going to do it again. Thank you so much. And now, Governor Lamont.
All right. Thanks, Dick. Hey, everybody. Yeah, 1941 was a long time ago, but we had a busy morning. Yesterday was my 69th birthday, and Secretary Pete, thank you very much for the birthday present. See you on my 70th. Top that. But my reason to say that is, you know, I've heard many different presidents over the decades all tell me I'm going to be the first real infrastructure president since Ike. Okay. The first infrastructure president since Ike is Joe Biden. Joe Biden has delivered the goods. Joe Biden is making a difference. This is a bridge that goes back, as you heard, 70 plus years. It's long overdue, and we're getting this job done. And for that, I am so appreciative. I think you understand that this is not a bridge to nowhere. Remember that old phrase? This is a bridge to opportunity, as Keith Brothers said. What that means in terms of the apprentices, giving everybody that chance, that opportunity going forward. You know, you heard Dick and Chris say this is a pivot place right here. This is a bridge in terms of national security and what we're doing, you know, over at Electric Boat, what it means to our energy future right down the way there at State Pier. We can't do it without this bridge. And it's just extraordinary to me that for the last 15 years, all those overweight trucks had to reroute 22 miles in the wrong direction. Well, that's not going to happen anymore. And I always love Secretary of Labor Marty Walsh's comment. He says, I'm not an ornithologist, but my favorite bird is the crane. And I see a lot of cranes, I see a lot of future, and I see a lot of opportunity right here. And one last thought, Dick mentioned democracy and smooth transition of power. And I had an opportunity to meet with Secretary Pete, I don't know, a month or so ago. And he brought up all the benefits of what infrastructure means. And he brought up one that really made me think. How fast trains go is one of them. But he said it's also about democracy. And he reminded me that there was a guy named Mussolini who about 100 years ago barged his way into office. And one of the lines he used was, I'm going to make the trains run on time. And you think about that, it's that democracy has to continue to deliver the goods for people so that they know that this is a government that works on their behalf. And I think infrastructure is a big part of that. I've got Mark Boughton here and Joe Giletti and our team that are going to put this as part of an overall infrastructure plan for the state of Connecticut. We got a lot of 100-year-old bridges. Everything in the state got pretty old, including the governor. And we're making some real investments right now that'll make a difference. And Secretary Buttigieg, we're not going to disappoint you. This is an investment that's going to make a difference. Secretary Buttigieg.
Well, thank you, first of all, Governor. Congratulations. Happy birthday. Very glad to be able to join you in starting this new term off right with some very good news. And so pleased with everybody who's been able to join. But in particular, I want to acknowledge the governor's championing of this project. I want to thank Senator Murphy and Senator Blumenthal for what they've done to make all this possible, too. And I don't just mean their advocacy for this project. I mean the fact that we wouldn't have the funding to do this in the first place if it weren't for the infrastructure law that they supported. Them and the House members who I know wish they could be here, but as has been mentioned, have other urgent business on the floor of the U.S. House. In addition to their leadership, ranging from foreign policy to taking care of veterans to aviation consumer protection, they were there every step of the way, including while this infrastructure law 2 years ago was repeatedly described by some commentators as being dead. I want to thank all of the state legislators who are here. It's good to be in a state that understands the importance of infrastructure. I want to thank all of the mayors who are here, Mayor Passero and the City of Groton, Mayor Hedrick, and Town of Groton, Mayor Melendez. I love a community that has its mayors in order because that still remains, I think, the most demanding level of on-the-ground government. And I really appreciate hearing the stories of Carolina and Melody who explained what this means economically and why it's so important that we get this right. And to Keith Brothers, to all of the building trades workers here, the iron workers, the representatives of the operating engineers, everybody who's part of this. But part of why we're doing all of this is to make sure that we keep you busy for a very long time. And we know that you're going to deliver on this project and so many other across the country. This is a very good day for infrastructure in the United States of America. Today, in our first major announcement of the new year, we're announcing the first ever round of funding through a new program that was created under President Biden's leadership to fix bridges and projects that were so big that they really couldn't fit into any other federal program. These kinds of facilities are the cathedrals of our infrastructure, and I think we've known for a long time that they have been in need of repair. Just right here, tens of thousands of people are driving across that Gold Star Bridge every day to get to their jobs, to get to school, to get to everything else that matters in their lives. And as was mentioned, so much freight covers this bridge in a season when America has finally learned to treat supply chains as something that deserves to be kitchen table talk. A significant portion of our national freight moves right on this span. And as everybody here knows, the bridge is not in good enough shape. It's about to turn 80 years old. Parts that have been given a rating of poor. That means drivers can still use it, but often have to reroute. You can't allow those heavy freight vehicles to pass over it. So when those overweight trucks have to exit I-95 about 6 miles west, drive to the Thames River Bridge, cross and then turn south onto 12, that adds another 9 miles right there. We know that that is cost, time, and money, in addition to adding to emissions into our atmosphere. Now, in about 10 years, there will be additional types of vehicles, not just the heaviest trucks, that would have to take that detour, eventually including emergency vehicles, school buses, and the like, without intervention. But of course, we're not going to let that happen. That's why we're here today. We are delighted, therefore, to make it official that we're announcing that the Department of Transportation is awarding $158 million to modernize the northbound Gold Star Memorial Bridge. We're funding structural repairs that will increase that weight capacity so that those heavy vehicles can use the bridge and don't have to reroute. We're funding also a new multi-use path on the bridge so that people can bike or walk safely across that span too. And across it all, we are going to create a lot of good-paying jobs. I want to applaud the governor and the department for that project labor agreement that Keith was describing, to make sure that these are going to be not just good jobs, but good-paying American union jobs that you can build a family around. Keith said it right. We're not just building bridges. We're building livelihoods. We're building futures. And I also want to applaud the work that is being done here in the building trades to open up the doors to those good-paying jobs, to people who maybe a generation or two ago would not have seen themselves having a place in construction building trades. And I was trying to think of a way to illustrate just how important and demanding these jobs are, and I think the best way I can do it, rather than flowery words, is just to invite you to look at the top of the first of the concrete piers behind me, and to see how just at the top of that span where it comes across, there is a ladder. Imagine being one of the workers who climbs up that ladder. Imagine being one of the workers who installed that ladder. This is what we ask of the people who are literally building America's future, and we're excited to be keeping a generation of construction, logistics, and transportation workers in business through this and the other projects that we're funding through this infrastructure law. That's what makes it a good day across America. Today we're reaffirming some of the essential priorities that are why we have to invest so much in our infrastructure to begin with. The resilience of America's supply chains so that we can keep goods moving rapidly and affordably, and the national security implications in this region that is host to Electric Boat and to the naval base. By the way, I want to thank you for welcoming this Navy guy to New England. Now, admittedly, I was not a submariner. I wasn't even a regular mariner. My specialty was counterterrorism, which is how I wound up being that rare naval officer sent to a landlocked country like Afghanistan. But all the same, if you wore the uniform for even one day in the United States Navy or Navy Reserve, you know the importance of Groton and New London to American national security. And we recognize the importance of this infrastructure to this region. As was mentioned by several of the others, it's also worth pausing to compliment everybody behind this application because this was such a competitive program. In just this category alone, within the larger bridge investment program, there were 40 applications requesting $11 billion in funding. 4 of them were successful. This one, The Brent Spence Bridge in Ohio and Kentucky, where the president is today. Chicago, where the vice president today is celebrating a network of bridges that help connect goods all the way from the Great Lakes down to the Gulf of Mexico. And then tomorrow, our Deputy Secretary and Infrastructure Coordinator, Mitch Landrieu, are going to be in San Francisco, where the Golden Gate Bridge needs to be rehabilitated to make it stronger in the face of earthquakes. And these 4 bridges were chosen partly because they are not just iconic pieces of infrastructure, but they are essential to America's economic strength. We cannot have the kind of economy we need without them. But I should note that it's not just about the big iconic bridges like this. Just since the president signed that law, 2,800 bridges around America have been put on the path to being improved or replaced. And this, in turn, of course, is part of the context of investment in all different kinds of infrastructure. We awarded grants last year doubling the access to low and no emission buses on the road. We've announced major upgrades to dozens of ports, over 80 airports. And we just announced $9 billion in funding to significantly upgrade rail service along the Northeast Corridor, our country's busiest passenger train route, as both of your senators never tire of reminding me. We are here with the resources to help make sure that we're supporting that Northeast Corridor. So at the end of the day, we are going to have cause to celebrate not just in the next few years when workers are doing this good work to build this and repair this bridge, but for the next decades as so many Americans count on it. And that in turn is part of what's happening in our economy as 750,000 new manufacturing jobs have been created across this country since President Biden took office, building everything from advanced microchips to clean steel to electric vehicles. Offshore wind and other clean energy sources, like what's going to be supported by that port work that the governor is leading right around the corner from where we're standing, are all part of how we're building an economy that's going to work for everybody. And I'd be remiss if I didn't note, even if it's a little outside my lane, how excited we are across the administration that as of 3 days ago, seniors on Medicare will now pay $35 a month for insulin instead of the $400 some were paying before. Again, all of this part of a bigger picture of what it looks like to have the right kind of economy. So again, I want to congratulate everybody who has stood by this project. I want to thank in advance everybody who's going to do such hard work on bringing this project to fruition. And I hope you will save a space for me at the celebration when we're cutting a ribbon on this, because that too will be a very good day for infrastructure across the United States of America. Thanks very much and congratulations. With that, I think we have a chance for a couple of media questions. My colleague Carrie in the green coat will quarterback that. Thank you. That's the thing with cathedrals, is they aren't built or even repaired overnight. But we know that this project has the support that is going to be needed to pick up the pace. Part of why we're bringing this level of funding is to make sure that the date for completion can come sooner than it would have if we hadn't intervened. We know that every day that a truck's got to go around the long way, every day that a driver isn't so certain about whether this is the right route for them, is a day when an opportunity is lost. And that's why this legislation, the kind of legislation that president after president and Congress after Congress had looked at, that the last administration talked a big game about, but now was actually done, and I would add, done on a bipartisan basis, shows you that the time for talk is over, the time for work is underway, and trust me, I'm as impatient as anybody else and excited to see this get done. That's right. A multi-use path is part of the project plan, and that's part of how a project can compete successfully for federal funds, knowing that as part of that bigger picture, that brings enhancements from a safety perspective, from a climate perspective. I don't know if there are any more details that the state wants to offer about the vision there, but we're glad to support that part of it.
Yes.
In order to get this, when we were dealing with this grant, one of the things we had to look at was what was lacking on the one side versus the other side. How do we make sure that our bridges are going to provide for that bike and pedestrian? This one will, okay? It was part of the application that went in, and it's what you're going to see on all of our future bridges as well, because we have realized that the way of the future is by involving those bike and pedestrian lanes going across and making sure we've taken care of that at the same time.
Thanks.
Thank you. Sure.
Well, again, Joe might have more details on this. Let me tell you that if you look at the projections a few years out, you get to the point where the load restrictions become more and more constraining, and more vehicles are subject to that. And obviously that's the exact opposite of what we need to have happen given the economic growth that's going to happen here. You know, if you allow a bridge to go too long without that kind of rehabilitation, it's like a leaky roof, only gets more expensive to take care of, which is part of why this project succeeded in a very competitive mix. I'm going to refer you to the state for any more details.
The answer is a minimum of 1 year was already eliminated by what we were able to get with this funding and be able to move the project forward. So you're going to cut out at least a year of construction and a year of the applications and everything else that were necessary to go and get it, because the funding is now in place. So again, thanks to our congressional delegation, thanks to Washington, we've got the money to move this thing forward. We don't have to stage it the way we were going to, and we can advance it much more quickly.
Yeah. Hi. Absolutely. We have launched a national roadway safety strategy that looks at every part of safety. Safer cars, that's why we have things like the crash test dummies and the 5-star ratings. Safer drivers, which means continuing to make sure drivers understand the importance of not just things like DUI, but avoiding distracted driving. But a big part of that is the roads themselves, safer roads. And when we better design our roads in every respect, from the material to the way interchanges work to having that kind of dedicated passage for vulnerable road users like bikes and pedestrians, that has the opportunity to save lives. So that's absolutely of a piece with the economic benefit, and one of many reasons why I think this this legislation, this funding is so important, so needed. Stay tuned for more information, more announcements coming this year in our Safe Streets and Roads for All program, which will be smaller individual grants than this one, but across the country we think going to make a big difference for road safety. Thanks again, congratulations. Can't wait to be back here to see the progress. Take care.
That's a good day for
This is the highlight of our day.
Good Fred. The highlight of my day.
It's a close third. Okay.
Yeah, let's do a couple for an hour.
Hey, Christine.
Hello, congratulations, Governor, and happy birthday.